Howdy everyone, it's me once again, the one and only Killer Dan. So I got another spooky type video to do right here, of course, because as far as I'm concerned, Halloween's a year-round thing anyway. So here we go, I suppose. Anyway, I just thought I'd just do another book review kind of a thing. It's for a graphic novel, obviously, and it's a sequel to the previous one I've already reviewed, of course. It's collecting this big book, of course. So yeah, there's volume two. Even though it originally started as comics, but then collected later as this kind of a thing, this big barking book, I guess. So the people behind this, of course, I would say did a really good job when it comes to the inking, the art design, the writing. So yeah, did a really good job in regards of that, of course. At least I thought so. And the coloring and all that really does a good job. The artwork is really good, along with the bunch of other people who were behind these comics that were collecting the one book, of course. Yeah, they all did really well. I thought so, of course. And so, no real complaints really at all. And as for the cover, I like the cover though. She looks really bloody, of course. So like she's been through a lot. So yeah, pretty much a chaotic scene, I guess. The cover is really nice. So I like the cover because you can tell she's been through a crazy moment. I like the eyes, the shape of the head and whatnot. Everything seems like an even proportion, of course, and whatnot. Just a bloody mess. Oh, definitely. Anyways, but of course, like always, let's just talk about the plot, shall we? So here we go. So, of course, this is pretty much continuing the adventures of the main character, whom I mentioned in the previous video. Is this goth woman, and yes, she has her own teammate, of course, and her teammate's like this behemoth of a guy. They're trying to find these these slashers. I was gonna say these individuals, and she's basically the final girl from this, of course. Like in slasher movies, she's that final girl that has to go after all these people, of course, and whatnot. Our main character, she's basically has to do her own thing here. Obviously, it's not an easy job, and at least she has some assistance, I guess. The second part pretty much picks up the events from the first volume and attempts to go deeper into our main character's ongoing battle against the supernatural killers, monsters, stuff like that, while exploring her backstory a bit more, relationships, and expanding the universe of horror, of all these spooky stuff, of course. So, yes, of course, this volume does attempt to maintain the series blend of horror, satire, and, of course, character driven story. So, like I said, we get to see that we get into more of her past, in a lot of ways, her traumatic history, including her troubled relationship with her mother, whom, like I said in the previous video, is this notorious slasher. We see like flashbacks that reveal her childhood trauma. I mean, the first one kind of did it, but this one goes more into it, of course, and how it shaped her mission to hunt monsters. These insights do open the okay, it's deepen the reader's understanding of our main character, motivations, and resilience as a way to pretty much try to keep going, despite what had occurred, of course. So, yes, this I know can be a very sensitive subject matter, like I said in my previous video. Yes, writing about trauma, especially in a way that could invoke shock or intense emotions, requires careful handling to avoid unintentionally causing harm or more maybe trivializing these experiences. Yes, which can lead to shell shock, of course, obviously, especially considering the main character's backstory because her mother trying to kill people and whatnot and kill her. So yikes. So in this series, Hack Slash, the series pretty much approaches our main character's past with a mix of dark humor, yes, horror, yes, and of course a bit of empathy, of course. Trying to be really careful with this kind of thing. And yes, it's a very, very tricky subject matter to talk about. It aims to explore her resistance, of course, and how her trauma shapes her identity and mission, rather than just simply, I guess, trivializing the pain, trying to make it like it was no big deal, like get over it, or that kind of thing. That really stupid way to say it, of course. Yes, the series often uses her backstory to deepen the character, of course, illustrating how she confronts and overcomes the past the best way she could, which yes, which in itself can be actually pretty empowering for the readers, obviously. But however, it's important to recognize that trauma can be very, very personal. Well, I know it's like no shit, Sherlock, but yes, what can resonate for, or triggers for one person may not be for another. So creators and comic writers have to be very careful. Those who explore this such themes often thrive, at least for a more balanced approach when it comes to recognizing pain, respecting its impact. Yes, of course, offering a narrative of strength and recovery. Of course, you couldn't actually do this kind of thing without making it, overdoing it. I mean, it trivializing it, of course. But for this story, of course, there's going to be recurring villains and some new villains, of course. This volume, Volume 2, introduces new supernatural threats, of course, and revisits similar familiar slashers. Some stories, of course, parody classic horror villains like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and others, of course, that you may expect, while inventing original monster foes, of course. The tone remains the same like it was does previously, of course, and whatnot, obviously. So it does try and do its own thing in some ways, of course, obviously. And of course, like I said before, having a female lead without making it seem like, oh, is it's a man hating themed story, which is not the case. You couldn't have a female lead in a story without making it seem like a gore boss, cringy kind of thing. Thankfully, that this definitely avoids that. Thankfully. So yes, I mean yes, of course you might argue that, I was saying, is that it might seem typical. Like of course the goth girl is gonna have some kind of traumatic past. Of course, I mean I know that seems kind of typical, but this story volume two, just like the fourth volume, is trying to attempt to still make it refreshing in its own way, and yeah, it's trying to do it in a way where it attempts to make her seem like she's not going to give up on life. She's not spiteful. Of course, I mean, yes, of course, she might have a bit of an attitude, of course. She might have a bit of trouble and whatnot when it comes to going out and about. Of course, yes, her life is not going to be easy, but point being, it's in regards to her experience. This has nothing to do with her being goth. Yes, it makes me seem stereotypical, but she's an outcast anyway, so of course, in some way, she's going to relate to the goth culture to some extent, of course, because for one, she's an outcast, and goth people, emos, and all that are known for being the outcast of society anyway, and whatnot. So there's that, I reckon, just so you know. So, of course, it's throw it out there. It's not trying to go on stereotypical stuff, of course. It's not. It's not trying to do that kind of a thing whatsoever, of course. Again, I'm just throwing it out there for whoever wants hear my 2 cents about that kind of a thing. At least that's how I took it in a way when it comes to this story at the end of the day. But anyway, moreover, is that speaking of outsiders, yes, this series also explores the themes of the LGBT plus community. Yes, that is a thing. Hack and Slash has been recognized for its inclusivity representation of the LGBT community. The series does feature LGBT plus community characters, like in this one. Of course, it goes into that as well, and themes, which of course was relatively progressive at the time, especially considering the time when it was first published originally. Because you don't keep in mind, like I said before, this started off as single individual issues before being collected into a novel like this. So this was not its original print. It was technically reprinted, of course, obviously. So when it was originally done as its individual issues, it was pretty progressive at the time, is what I'm saying. So yes, including the LGBT plus characters does allow the series to be reflected on a broader spectrum of experiences and identities, so on and so forth, promoting diversity and representation in horror comics and comics storytelling in general. Yes, of course, it can also add depth to the character limit when it comes to this kind of thing, rather than just having it in there just for its own sake. I guess you can say just in there for its own, just to do it, I suppose. But it's done in a way where it's actually challenges the stereotypes, fosters a sense of belonging, and of course vulnerability for the readers who belong in such group, rather than just not just making it be just tokenism. Thankfully, it's not just tokenism just for its own sake, like I said a moment ago. The portrayal of the LGBT themed characters in the series is often integrated with neutrality into the story with respect and care, and pretty much going on with the overall series of tone of embracing individuality, which the series was already doing anyway, and confronting the, I guess, social spectrums of normality, of course, what's considered to be normal when it comes to society, of course. This inclusivity does help the universe, expanding universe of this series to be more relatable and more realistic for a diverse cast of readers and whatnot, which, of course, I should when you think about it. And because, especially when it comes to our main character's partnership and allies, of course, we can see her friend, our main character's friend, this big tall guy with a mask. Yeah, he continues to be a loyal companion, providing comic relief and support. This volume also includes other allies and characters that expand upon this universe. Some assist her in the hunts, and others who may challenge her, I guess you can say. So that's something to be considered, of course. Quite obviously, this also goes into the whole slasher on horror movie tropes. Many stories in this does focus on, yes, a main character confronting slashers inspired by what's considered to be classic horror movies, with, in some ways, I guess, somewhat satirical takes on the tropes, stalking, masks, crazy creative kills, etc., etc., etc. These are encounters often serve as a commentary on horror genre itself when it comes to these conventions, of course, while showcasing our main characters' resourcefulness and toughness, of course, obviously. And then, like I said, the theme of traumas here, revenge, and confronting your own past remains central, of course. And yeah, these stories often explored themes on identity, the nature of monsters, both literal and metaphorical, the cost of revenge, of course. I know in some ways I'm kind of going over it in a general sense, but I don't want to give it too specific here, but because I don't want to spoil too much, really. Yes, obviously, there will also be major storylines and highlights in regards of a story arc involving a particular deadly slasher who embodies chaos and unpredictability. That's here, of course. And yes, of course, exploration of our main character's struggles, or inner struggles, and her desire for normality versus her life as a monster hunter when she has to hunt down these slashers, so to speak. I guess you can say because her life is far from normal, of course. Of course, encountering with meta horror elements where the comic reference horror fandom and horror tropes, stuff like that, of course, with humor and wit. But one more thing I would definitely say is that, okay, there's quite a few other things I want to bring up. Is the artwork. The artwork is actually really good. I like the artwork that was done here. So yes, the artwork here is actually really nicely done, folks. It's rarely appreciated for its expressive art style, dramatic storytelling. The art style in this does bring a lot of energy and personality onto the stories. Well, comic books are a visual medium, so the artwork does need to be done correctly, of course. I mean, you think that's like the most obvious thing ever, but never mind. Anyway, but yeah, it'd be a pleasure to the series, blending horror elements with some kind of craziness, comic flair that enhances the dark humor and intense action when it's serious. The artwork can effectively capture the horror aesthetic, the blood, the gore, monster suspense, while also allowing for expressive character movements, especially when it comes to our main characters being tough yet vulnerable, personality, the use of bold lines, when it comes to those contrasts, so and stuff and whatnot. If done carefully, of course, it can be much appreciated, obviously. And yes, that's good though. That's really good, of course. It can help to with the character designs, detailed character designs helps to bring the story alive. Of course, keeps the tone alive and engaging. The visual elements of a mix of horror and satire, as mentioned before, with each individual story. It can be visually striking and memorable. It's one of the, I guess, artistic choices that the series apart from other kind of similar-ish horror stories, of course. One other thing I'm gonna add real quick. Yes, this does have a fair amount of nudity, but it's not done for its own sake, though. It's done within the purposes of the storytelling. It's not just, oh, only just for the sake of it, thankfully. So, yes, it does include some nudity, of course, and it does serve well for what the story purpose, of course, which, yes, needs to be handled carefully. It doesn't come out like really juvenile whatsoever, thankfully, of course. And it does help to drive the story in some kind of way within the purposes of the plot or whatnot. So, bottom line is what I'm trying to say is I'm not going to be some prune. I'm like, how dare you show that in comic, blah, 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 and all that jazz. Which, of course, can be really tricky because, given the subject matter, of course, you don't want to come off like you're some insensitive individual who don't care about anything, of course. But yes, within the purpose of the story, whether it's to lighten the horror or to express vulnerability, which in a way you could use nudity if that. You can use nudity as a way to express nudity and being vulnerable. It doesn't in itself have to be sexual, but though it can be. But anyway, you can show like you're vulnerable, like you're opening up with whoever you're with. Oh, or just to express how an individual's personality is like, and yada yada. I could go on and on with that. But yeah, it depends on how comfortable the person is with you. I mean, okay, let me just stop there because this video is already lengthy as enough. But anyway, bottom line, what I'm trying to say is that this was a pretty good entry. I thought it was a good entry of the series. I liked it. I thought this was good to read. Of course, it's a lot of pages. Of course, it's a lot to go through, but it's a good read. The pacing was pretty good. Again, the writing isn't too shabby. The writing's pretty sharp. Of course, no pun intended because get it, stabby, stabbing, sharp. But anyway, it's good writing altogether. So I can't really see anything fault at this really. But anyway, I would say definitely recommend this, of course, in this format. I mean, it might be pretty pricey, but it would ultimately be a lot more cheaper than buying each individual issue on their own. But anyway, I do recommend it. Good read. I'm trying to read and review more books more often as whenever I have the chance. Anyway, I'll give this an overall rating of a 7.3 out of 10. It's a 7.3 out of 10. Thanks for watching. See ya.